Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Alba Mar, me pueden decir Alba. Estamos aquí para hablar de libros, algunos de ellos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello, my name is Alba Mar, you may call me Alba. The channel name is Seriela, and we're here to talk about books and some of them in Spanish from Puerto Rico. We just had an earthquake. I don't know how strong on the Richter scale, but it lasted enough and was strong enough for me to get out of this chair and see whether my neighborhood was up in arms. But people are still calm, so I'm going to be calm too. I'm going to get this done because this is the second time I've been trying to get this video out. This is going to be a little bit of a vlog plus a wrap-up plus a TBR of an event that Mel at Mel's Bookland Adventures has originated. So let's get started. Around September 7th, precisely on September 7th, I went to an activity commemorating the birthday of Don Pedro Albizu Campo, which, as you might remember, was the president of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party during the 1930s, 40s, and up until he died in 1965, if I'm not mistaken. At this activity, I had forgotten that the author of many, many books on Don Pedro Albizu Campo, Pedro Aponte Vázquez, was going to be there. And I did not take the book that I've been reading on the indictment. This one is in English. The Unsolved Case of Dr. Cornelius P. Rhodes, which I'm going to talk about once I finish. I'm like halfway through. An Indictment by Pedro Aponte Vázquez. This is about a scandalous event, scandalous letter that was found here in Puerto Rico. I'll let you know later on. But Pedro Aponte Vázquez was there. I'll include a brief clip of the activity. And he very kindly signed the latest book of his that I purchased at the event, and also gave me his email so that I could get in touch with him in case I had any questions about this book and any other book that he has written. So I appreciated that very much. Then, if you might recall, I had mentioned the fact that after I read Cuando Era Puertorriqueña, When I Was Puerto Rican, by Esmeralda Santiago, that I had no interest in watching, in going to see the play that was going to be presented that first weekend in September. What happened? Come to find out that Esmeralda Santiago herself was going to be at each and every function. So, you know, changed my mind, and my daughter-in-law, and my consuegra, which is like my co-mother-in-law, the mother of my daughter-in-law, we got together and we went to see this play and spent the night in San Juan. Fascinating. Fascinating. And I'm going to put a clip of the play. And I had thought that Esmeralda Santiago wouldn't be able to sign any books, you know, having gone to each and every function and everything. But she very, very graciously signed all the books that all these people lugged to the play. And since I had just received that same week a haul that I had made on her books. I took them with, and she signed them. So yeah, very happy to have gone to the play and to see this very, very well done production, adaptation of Esmeralda Santiago's novel, memoir, When I Was Puerto Rican. Had a great time. And look what came in the mail today. Raúl Juliá's DVD, the documentary of his life, of the world's a stage. Yes, I think I'm going to be watching this to celebrate the end of Shake Tube. It'll be great. So, what's been happening? Let's update. As I told you, I was going to read this one for Latinx-a-thon, and I highly recommend it. If I gave stars, which I usually don't, I do if it's a good Puerto Rican book. I give it 5 stars. This one gets a 5 stars. This is a novela called Fe en Disfraz. It's in Spanish, by Afro-Latina professor, author, artist, Mayra Santos Febres. I had read a book by Mayra Santos Febres about a fictionalized account of the life of Isabel la Negra, who was a madam in Ponce at the turn of the last century, the middle of the last century. And she came to become a very wealthy woman. And the novel was interesting. Isabel la Negra's life was interesting. But that novel had something that is very hard for me to read, and that is the narratives by people who are suffering emotional and mental distress. And so I was a little leery about reading this, but it was fantastic. This was a fantastic read. Fe Verdejo, which is fe, which means faith. Fe Verdejo is a scholar and she specializes in black female slaves of all ages, from childhood to old age. And she has found documents in which some of these slave women during period of colonization would appeal to the authorities, colonial administrators, for leniency, for compassion, for freedom from the abuses of their masters. And that documentation, as she moved on in her research studies to headquarters in Chicago, in the University of Chicago, those documents had to be digitalized. And in comes the Puerto Rican historian Martín Travieso. I think that's his name. And they have an affair. Long story short, they have an affair. But Fe Verdejo has been so affected by the accounts that she has read, the experiences that slave women endured centuries past, that she becomes possessed. And that possession is symbolized in the dress that she inherits, that is bequeathed to her by a nun in Brazil when she goes to study the famous slave Sika, who had been so loved by her master, that he had sent off to Europe to have this opulent, bejeweled dress made for Sika, his beloved slave. And Fe Verdejo, the moment she puts on that dress, she becomes possessed. The affair is so very interesting because it inverts all the roles that were present in slavery. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just going to give a message out to Kazen and Shawn, who are two of the people who, with most maturity, address sexuality in BookTube, in my opinion, with a lot of maturity and a lot of grace. It's too bad you guys do not read Spanish, because this was hot and very, very well done. A well-integrated part of the story. So I highly recommend Fe en Disfraz by Mayra Santos Febres. That was my first read for Latinxathon, and I am continuing with Latinxathon. Revolt for Independence, Puerto Rico's Revolt for Independence, El Grito de Lares by Olga Jimenez de Wagenheim. This one is the English version. I had read the Spanish version, which was first published in 1984. And now that I'm reading it in English, I understand a lot more. Because after all, I was raised in the United States, and English is my first language. I read it in Spanish, but this time, and maybe because I've read other history books about Puerto Rico at that time, I understand so much more. Olga Jimenez de Wagenheim was a professor at Rutgers University, did an extensive amount of research about that period of time. Got to understand what was happening in Puerto Rico, why Puerto Rico and Cuba did not seek their independence along with the other countries, along with Simón Bolívar at the time, why that didn't happen, and why the call for independence came about 100 years later. Yeah, this fascinating book. Like almost halfway through. I'm still reading Truman y Puerto Rico, the origins of failed decolonization project, learning a lot about Puerto Rico during the Cold War. And we'll talk about this when I finish. I only have 100 pages left, and yeah, so very interesting too. A lot of research went into that one also. I finished The Winter's Tale, and I'm just going to recommend that you hop over to Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, because Jason and his wife Kelly did a delightful review of The Winter's Tale. I loved it a lot. And I cannot, going back to Puerto Rico's revolt for independence, y el Grito de Lares. Grito de Lares was commemorated today, the 23rd of September in 1868, was when the Republic of Puerto Rico was proclaimed in Lares, Puerto Rico. That's why he's there, because Ramón Emeterio Betances, who is that man there, Ramón Emeterio Betances was the prime leader of that revolt. Lasted maybe 24 hours, maybe 36, but it is still a significant date for many, many Puerto Ricans, and today hundreds of people went to Lares to commemorate that event. Also on the 23rd of September, but this time in 2005, the FBI assassinated Filiberto Ojeda Rios, who had been leader of a clandestine independence group, and left him to bleed to death in his house. A 74-year-old elder, and next year will be commemorating 15 years after that murder. So yeah, 23rd of September is a very significant date in Puerto Rican history. So Mel at Mel's Book Adventures has originated this event for the remaining months of the year, and I have selected a few books. She has thought up the idea of, during the last week of each of the remaining months, the last week of September, which is now, the last week of October, last week of November, last week of December, to read a book that was published between 1900 and 1950. And so I have switched out from my Latinx TBR. I have switched out Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which was an author from a different Hispanic heritage than mine. I'm going to choose Camilo José Cela, La Familia de Pascual Duarte, which was first published in 1942. So that's going to be for this week. Fingers crossed, because I have a lot of books to read still for Latinx-a-thon. For the following month, for October, the last week of October, I'm going to be reading La Llamarada by Enrique Laguerre, Puerto Rican author. La Llamarada means the fire, and this is refers to the fires that used to be lit on the cane fields to make the cane easier to cut down with the machete. And that was first published in 1935. And then for November, I'm going to be reading The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham, and I should have jotted down the year 1944. It says here 1944, Somerset Maugham, The Razor's Edge. So I'm going to leave it here, people, because there might be a little tremor, you know, an aftershock later on. Okay, so cuídense mucho, sigan leyendo. Thanks for watching. Keep reading. Take care. Adiós.